I've got a secret for you. You don't have to be an amazing developer to create and release apps. I started this channel to prove that you don't have to know everything or create everything with the best practices. In this video, I'm going to talk about my app development process without relying on genius level dev skills. I originally wanted to make apps because it interested me, and I think that's key. Your passion for the project is going to push you through all the things you don't know. So the first step is to come up with something you're excited about or just a project you think will be fun. I think the idea, and more so your passion about the idea, is the most important thing. So come up with something you're really excited about. I don't have professional app development experience, but I do have professional software development experience. So when it came time to make my first app, I wanted to draw on that experience so I wasn't starting from scratch. So for my first apps, I wrote them in React Native because I had React Web Dev experience. It's not exactly the same, but it's pretty close. And I found that I was able to create some apps using React Native fairly easily. After my first two apps, I realized that React Native just wasn't exactly what I was wanting it to be. I found that I wanted that native app development experience. So I decided to switch to Swift UI. I started with hacking with Swift UI, and I completed that in a couple months. It provided enough depth for me to ask the questions that I needed and to get started without taking way too long. So I was ready to start my next project and write it in Swift UI. I found that if I don't have to rely on my brain power, my previous skills or knowledge, then I can get quite a bit done. I'm not a designer, but I found that using Swift UI to create my designs was very effective. I didn't have to go and learn Figma or something like that. And I found that using Swift UI stacks just makes sense in my head in a way that CSS never has. And I just love that spacer view. I've also found it effective to use Apple's design as much as possible. They've created forms and lists that look nice, so I don't have to create those myself. Most notably, I use ChatGPT a ton. I find it's a good starting off point for me. I don't have to remember how to manipulate Swift data queries to get the data that I want. I can just go ask ChatGPT how to do it, and it gives me at least a starting point. I've also found it very effective in helping me figure out bugs or errors or just figuring out why something is behaving in a way that I'm not expecting. It's like having a conversation with somebody who does know the system and language, and me being able to explain what I'm seeing, and then they can tell me why it's behaving that way. There's no shame in cutting a few corners in order to deliver your apps. I'm not a genius and I don't have a ton of time to figure all of these things out, so I cheat a little. I really don't follow a ton of best practices. There's one that I stick to fairly consistently, and that's splitting my views into as small of sub-views as I possibly can. And honestly, that's more so out of efficiency. When the views are so small, I can usually stick to things like state and binding, and that will give me the functionality that I need. And getting back to ChatGPT, I do probably use it a little too much. I am a little worried I'm hurting my development by not trying to figure these things out on my own, or am I maybe just exposing myself to more and I'll just kind of pick it up by being exposed to it a bunch. I guess I'll find out in the future which one it is. And finally, I don't really concern myself all that much with optimization. It's just not worth it for my apps. They're mostly pretty basic, so I don't have to concern myself with it being the most optimal solution. I do often feel some degree of imposter syndrome, especially when I see other people's indie app development devlogs and things like that. And it makes me wonder if what I'm doing is even worth it. Or should I completely change my approach? Would it be better off if I spent more time implementing better practices or better design patterns? Should I spend more time on those optimizations? Should I spend more time finding a better solution and then instead of sticking with the first thing that works? Should I try harder to create a better UI design up front? But at the end of the day, I'm really just trying to get my apps into users' hands, and doing it in the fastest way possible is pretty ideal to me. And let's be honest, they can't see my questionable code when they're downloading my app and using it. The point of this video is to say that I think almost anyone, especially if they have a desire to do so, can create and release an app. That being said, I do think my previous experience as a software developer have certainly helped me along. Mostly it's provided me with a base knowledge that allows me to know what questions that I need to ask in order to achieve what I want to in my apps. Finally, I do think being an above average developer would obviously make this easier, but honestly, it's not necessary, and I am proof of that. So now it's time for you to go out and create that first app. It's really not that hard. And if you want to follow along as I stumble through creating apps, subscribe and follow along. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time.